Well, it's the day before our satsang, and I've left Tina in the lurch. I actually have to take my earthly dad to the optometrist tomorrow for his appointment, so I'm going to be a little late to the satsang, about an hour late. So it's going to be cause for miracle mindedness on behalf of Tina, who's already panicking and wanting to cancel the satsang. But I will be there about 9 o'clock. It starts at 8 and I'll be there about 9, so probably just before 9 o'clock. So I wanted to make this video about teaching and learning because it's the finger on the nose. And I mean, the only thing you are ever really doing here is accepting atonement for yourself. It's the sole responsibility of the miracle worker, which is directly from A Course in Miracles. And it's the only activity of the miracle worker, really, when you, I mean, there's comforting and blessing and all of these sorts of things as well, but it revolves around atonement. I'm not separate from anyone or anything. So having an altruistic, empathetic view of life in the true sense, in the across the board sense, not in a specific and individual sense, which is why I'm not a huge fan of the idea of compassion. I mean, it comes into it, obviously, but empathy is more in alignment with atonement for me than compassion, and compassion more lends to acceptance. You know, there is an acceptance of the nature of life on earth, as the Buddha would say, as being suffering. Life on earth, all of life is suffering. And whilst we try to make the best of it and put on a smiley face, it's true. Like everything here ends in disappointment and death. And you cannot get out of it. Jesus says, even in the Course, swear not to die, you holy Son of God. You make a promise that you cannot keep. And you cannot keep it, and you wouldn't want to keep it, because the pivot on death, on the idea of death, which is the underlying predication of everything here, is that that's actually your whole way out. But you approach it with a different purpose. Like there's a whole different purpose for wanting to look at and accept the nature of what death actually is, which is the entire dominion of the third realm, the entire continuum, the entire dimension, if you like, the experience itself. So, welcome to death. And within death, as we embrace, you have to figure it out from where you're at with it, right? So it wouldn't do any good to try and pretend that you didn't find yourself in a dream and that you didn't put your pants on the same way as everybody else in the morning. Doesn't matter how spiritual you think you are, how spiritual I think I am, etc. We find ourselves here, and that's where we make our stand. And so in the idea of death, I'm always looking at it. I'm always looking at it whether I want to look at it consciously, right? Because it is what the external vista is, right? Whether I want to look at it consciously or not, I'm always looking at my own thoughts about myself as a temporal being, as a death-dedicated being, and choosing again, right? And I had a funny moment this morning, texting my daughter, who lives about 3 hours from here, and I was telling her my conundrum for the day, and just trying to make small talk, really, and she writes back, "Choose again, brother." It's my 16-year-old. And I have a feeling that my my ex-wife, her mother, might have had something to do with that simple reply. but I'm always putting my finger here, because it is always a matter of being able to choose again and making the conscious decision to choose again for my new purpose, which is now love rather than fear. So as I undertake my journey into fear and confront my fears, right? Now, the emotionality around making that confrontation might be a lot. It might seem a lot. There might be a huge emotional package. So if you're somebody who's had a particularly horrific experience earlier in life or whatever, and you're afraid of it happening again, and you have to confront that, what you're actually doing is confronting the emotionality of it, not confronting the situation. Right, so don't be afraid. It's not going to be something that you have to go through again. But in the action of forgiveness, I want to forgive my mind for manifesting that situation, because my mind is that I'm the dreamer of the dream. My mind manifests my reality, and everything I experience here is what I want to experience, as crazy as that sounds. But welcome to the world of death, which was the choice I made outside of time to come here and experience what this is all about. And in that, you get the memory wipe, completely forgetting that you're eternal. You can't actually ever die. You can undergo these horrific and gruesome experiences, and tragic, Jesus calls them. Delay in time is tragic. But once you give your life and will to God, like truly, and there's a lot of fakery around that right initially, but once you once you give your life and will to God truly, you kind of realize, you start reading the text and doing the workbook lessons of A Course in Miracles, and it takes you deeper and deeper into the psychology of your devotion and your discipline and everything like that. You kind of realize that there's this sort of umbrella of grace that envelops you and envelops your life. And whilst in the beginning, there's this kind of catch up where you're dealing with your old karma, your old story, because it still seems to be trailing behind you. And there's this kind of transitionary period where you come out of that and you realize that you're sort of entering into this new unfettered kind of experience of your humanness. And it is your humanness, where your emotional, judgmental capacity for experience here as a manifesting agency or a miscreating agency begins to get tidied up. Now, I had somebody on one of my, and I'm going to keep my finger on my nose here if I can, but I had somebody on one of my videos the other day, and it's a common thing. He commented, I feel like, or she commented, I feel like if I was to find God, my life would become very boring, or it would take away from me all the things that I like in the world. Yes, absolutely it will, right? But by thy will it's done, and you'll find that nothing gets taken away from you without your consent. But ultimately you realize that there's nothing here you would want to keep, because everything is just lipstick on a skeleton, no matter how good it is. And the whole point of participating in a spiritual discipline is to be able to move on in the journey of your soul out of this third dimensional reality. Now, if it's not really connecting with you that that's actually a thing, right? And you're like, oh, I don't know if I believe in all that, or maybe it's not even permeating that density of your stubbornness and resistance and everything to actually connect with that idea and what it really means. Then you're either going to have to pray for a miracle to understand the nature of life beyond the world and have a true experience about it, which you should be anyway, or you're going to have to go back out in the world and continue to get the results of your own thinking, which is going to be pain, suffering, and death. Welcome to, like life, all of life is suffering, said the Buddha. And it doesn't matter how good you make it, all of life is suffering. Some people, like Jesus says in the Course, some people put their suffering by in games they play to pretend that everything's fine. And some people recognize their suffering immediately and can't stand it and all that sort of thing. So, but nobody's capacity to withstand the full brunt of the suffering, pain, and everything of the initial experience of denial in the world can withstand. You can't withstand it. It's impossible. So you can't fight the universe as much as you want to try and stamp your foot. You're too diminished as a creative manifesting agency. Even Jesus, even Jesus wouldn't have even bothered to try. He said, resist not evil. Whatever the world throws at you, just accept it and whatever. And eventually this vessel, what are you trying to achieve here? So teaching and learning, it's not the teacher that teaches, it's the student. Right? There's a saying that says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I've had that reflected back to me. I think it's Lao Tzu said that. But I've had that reflected back to me many times, in discussions with people. And people often express a gratitude to me. And I always tell them, or I try to always tell them, all gratitude be to God. But they often express a gratitude, as I did to my teacher. I understand it completely. Gratitude for my devotion to their assistance, etc., etc. And I was totally grateful for Ted and everybody at the Healing Centre, Gina and Margot and Claire and Annie. I should just rattle off, I feel like, the Academy Awards here. Everybody, anyway, and everyone that was there, for helping me, for being there for me, and for standing in an energetic which was uncompromising. And it allowed me to see where I was off the mark with my own attempts to integrate the universal curriculum and to make choices, new choices, to choose again to help me better come into an alignment with that, with that Christ frequency, so that I can offer it, so that I can become like a channel for it and a expression of it, a living expression of that Christ energy. And I never really know how I'm doing with that. I just sort of, bob along at my own pace, really. It's not that different from anything else. It's like when you've sort of chosen to specialize in something, eventually you kind of must get good at it, one would hope. Or must have some sort of grasp of it. But Jesus does say you have to overlearn the course to learn it. So what occurs in teaching and learning is that the student brings the teacher the opportunity to teach and therefore learn what the teacher needs to hear, right? So as an idea of denial, as an idea of I'm the dreamer of my dream, and everyone out there, students, just nondescript general people, everything, every situation and event that goes on out there is an opportunity for me to do this, put my finger on my nose, and include back in what it is I've been projecting out onto the world as my judgments about things in an attempt to verify my time, space, location, and justify my identity, therefore, as being this body which is doomed to die compared to everyone else who's also doomed to die, right? If there is no death, as Jesus says, then everything I'm doing is completely bonkers. So atonement reverses that. It's like it brings you back into a singular perspective of the world where there's not me and other people doing similar things. There's me and other people reflecting back to me previous choices I've made in the cause and effect relationships that I'm in with them that give me an opportunity to, one, stand in my defenselessness in the recognition and the realization this is just an illusion, it's just a dream. You don't have to react at all to anything here. And why would you if you truly knew it was a dream? And two, to own it, to take responsibility for what I think I see in my own mind as being not separate from me. Okay, so this isn't separate from me. This is figures in a dream. These are the cast and crew of my dream. I am not this Dave entity sitting in this chair talking. I am mind. I'll try to make that bigger. I am Christ mind, one with you as Christ mind, initially pretending that we are these bodies, or that I am this body and that you are a body. But literally, I give you your ego, I give you your body, I give you everything. I'm projecting the dream from my own mind, right? From this mind, not this mind. When revelation dawns on the mind, all of it disappears. The buildings, the people, the houses, the world, the trees, the ducks, the geese, the clouds, the sky, the water, the oceans, the planets, the stars. This vessel, gone in the twinkling of an eye. When it occurred for me, I was looking at a group of people. Suddenly they vanished. I was looking at the wall, which was behind them. That vanished, and suddenly I could see outside all the houses and flowers and trees and bushes and everything. That all vanished, like the whole world vanished. It was like boop, 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 really quickly, like dominoes falling. People, wall, houses, and then world, everything, and including my body. And I found myself back in eternity. And it was so quick. Jesus calls it in the twinkling of an eye, right? In the Bible, he says, in the twinkling of an eye, you'll be changed. And in that instant, I was changed. But it's very, very difficult to talk about it. But all of a sudden, that experience of being back in eternity or awakening in eternity, it's the same as here. When you wake up in the morning from a dream, when I wake up in the morning from a dream, I open my eyes and suddenly the dream is ended. There may be some residue of the dream of like this, oh, that was a cool dream. And I had a really cool dream last night, and I was awoken by a woman's voice in the middle of the night, and I hadn't heard that before. But and it was in my consciousness, but it wasn't. Anyone who's ever heard a non-temporal voice will understand where I'm going with that, but I don't want to dwell on that. But the atonement, right? So when I'm teaching, all of these videos, etc., are merely just declarations. They're me putting out a certainty, putting out a vibration into the universe based on a certainty of an experience that I've had in my mind. The very words, syllables, sounds, energetic of my voice, of my willing expression of the idea and the fact that there is no world, presented through these concepts in this mind training video, is automatically and simultaneously, because everything is one thing, it doesn't take time to reach around the world. It's actually like a instantaneous presentation or an instantaneous harmonic throughout the world that makes changes that cannot be perceived. Right? So on the other side of the world, Jesus says, perhaps the parents will not scold the child, as a result of your forgiveness, and how beautiful that can make the world. And a wilted daisy begins to show, I forget what it is, but anyway, there's all these things that can occur. Birds begin to sing, and all this sort of stuff. And I get what he says by that, because I've seen it in close relations within my own relationships, where when I don't defend myself and I'm applying that action of forgiveness and atonement, something changes, right? And I was on a Taoist page the other day on Facebook and having a little back and forth with a guy. And he said, how come when you try to change things, nothing happens, and when you don't try to change things, something happens? Basically, because when you try to change things, you're interfering, and it's your interfering in the first place that fucks things up. As John Lennon would have said, let it be. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Just let it be. Don't interfere. Don't try to fix anything. Nothing's broken. It's only my own perception of things that's broken. And that can be changed in an instant if I'm willing to and if I let it. And therein hangs a tale, because that comes back to the point of being willing to actually commit to the Holy Spirit. And you get to see whether you actually are willing to commit to the Holy Spirit by how much of a radical change in your life you're able to affect. And it can be affected in an incredibly radical way if you want to, or if you're willing to totally hand over your life and will to God through the Spirit. Not God as in man in the clouds, but God as in more like the Force in Star Wars. God, the universal flow. And get back in the flow, like the hippies would say, in the 60s and 70s. We're in the flow, man. So teaching and learning, I like the example of, what was his name? Joel Goldsmith. I think one of the most beautiful examples that I ever read and ever heard about of this was Joel Goldsmith, where Joel Goldsmith was a self-realized guy that way before Course in Miracles, like surprise, surprise for all you Course in Miracles people. It's like people have been waking up for bloody decades, but for millennia really. But as the awakening progresses, it's going to occur more and more, which is why these mind training videos that I'm putting on YouTube and everybody else putting their efforts in as well is going to be more helpful, and it'll be nice for people to be able to find them who are now having these experiences just at random perhaps, or in collaboration with doing a Course in Miracles mind training or whatever else they're doing, yoga and meditation and stuff, and they don't know what to do with it after. Generally the ego corrupts it, so. But anyway, just to get back to teaching and learning, the idea that I've been projecting out from myself the denial of my reality in order to disprove it, or try to disprove it to myself as a potential of a belief in separation. Now I'm including that back in. Now I'm accepting all things back in. I've repented and I'm turning around and I'm going across those bridges I tried to burn, or that I did burn, rebuilding them with forgiveness and being defenseless in the face of all the accusers. You burnt this bridge, and and all of that sort of stuff. That's just a very loose analogy, but I'm including it back in. So when, as a teacher, let's say, which is the last identity that you'll have in time and space, and you kind of have to embrace it, because it holds you accountable to a certain specificity of operation in your own mind. So yes, I'm a teacher of God. It's not the truth of me. I'm a child of God. I am the Christ, one with you, co-creator with God. But on earth, for a moment, let me embrace that last identity that Jesus says. And he says also that you can't call yourself a teacher of God or a minister of God until you've completed the workbook. So but as you go back across all those bridges, you have to be defenseless in the face of accusation, in the face, because like forgiveness can be a process. And if you're a 12-step person and you've done AA or whatever, any of those spiritual recovery programs, there's always a component of forgiveness in there, and where you make amends, etc. Well, the making amends happens in your own mind. The making amends, whether you do it out there physically and address somebody and write a letter or whatever, is neither here nor there. If you do, good. If you don't, just as good. But it's always in my mind where I'm willing to forgive myself for asking that other person to play that part for me prior, in my old dream of death, to try and confirm my time-space separative location from them and determine that the world is real and therefore God must be not real, right? Because if God is love, then what is this world? It's a corruption. And if God is all-encompassing, there can't possibly be a corruption in God, because God is love unconditionally all across the board. Therefore, either God is false or the world is false, which is why you have to have an experience of the world is false, because it's an illusion. It's the Maya. Quantum physics now will even tell you it doesn't exist. It's only an experience of conscious perception relative to the observer. But as you go across those bridges, as you become more and more willing to forgive yourself for the emotional footprint, right, that seems to comprise the specifics and particulars individually, of course, of your own spiritual journey, you have to adopt defenselessness, and you have to participate with your finger on your nose that this is me, right? As in Christ mind. This is my brother in Christ. I've asked my brother to play this part. They did it faithfully. I got angry about that, or I had a grievance about that, or I made some sort of judgment about that. And now I'm going to lay all that down and embrace my brother. Thanks for playing that part. And I like the little analogy of, I've got two analogies here to go through. We're up to 25 minutes. I don't want to rabbit on. I know a lot of you guys only watch like 5 minutes. But the analogy of Imagine you were an actor on a stage, Romeo and Juliet, and you've been all around the world, you've been putting on this production for ages, and you're absolutely sick of it, like sick of the world, I'm sick of it, I'm going to go find Jesus, right? But you're on the stage and you're Romeo, and Juliet's up there in the thing, and she says, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo, and does her famous line, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can't do this anymore, and you just walk off the stage, right? All of a sudden, the whole production goes flat, and everybody either ad-libs or they just walk off the stage with you. Some people are going to attempt to ad-lib and try to recover the thing, but it's the pivotal point in the, you know, it's the crux of the whole thing. It's like that whole production of Romeo and Juliet centers around that scene. And right at that moment, at that crucial moment, it's like salvation always hits you right at the crucial moment in your life where you just can't take it anymore. Like, it's just fucking ridiculous. And you just walk out, you just repent, you turn, no, I'm not doing this anymore. And if you're like me, you'll leave your house. I left my house, I left my job, I left everything. And I'm like, I'm going to go study A Course in Miracles with these guys in Byron Bay. And it was a pivotal moment for me. It was like I knew I had to go. I couldn't just attend on a casual basis and turn up on the weekends. But and the other analogy that I have, which is lovely. Oh, I didn't finish the one about Joel Goldsmith. So Joel Goldsmith, and then I want to do Amma, the mother. Joel Goldsmith set up a clinic, right, where people would come and see him for counseling or for whatever, for healing. And he would just let them tell their story, right? They would tell their story, what's wrong and like whatever. And he would keep his finger on his nose, like metaphorically, and accept atonement, accept that he was not separate. I'm not separate from this person. This person is my mind telling me a story that I need to hear, because within it is an emotional attachment that I have, you know, like it's my story. And I can process it on behalf of my brother, and in that, heal it in me, which automatically then transfers to my brother, who is actually nothing more than a projection of my mind, right? As weird as that sounds, and we're all, and if you've ever read The Holographic Universe, you'll understand that one better. We're all just sheets of cellophane. We're all just characters. It's a green holographic sheet. Is like this. Imagine an A4 green plastic sheet, and it's got, if you break a part of it off, it contains the whole picture. No matter how much you break off, a little bit or a big bit, the whole picture's there. And it's like, well, that's how hologram works. But on the green sheet, there's a red character, which is me and mine, and there's a red character for you and yours. But we're all still on there, 8 billion of us on each other's sheets, sort of thing. And with salvation, we're pulling that sheet from the stack. The light no longer shines through it, and it gets less and less and less the more that awaken, the more that pull their sheets out from the stack and refuse to participate in that play of death, right? Until finally there's probably only a couple of crazy people on the planet, and everybody else, you know, I'll be the last. Shut the gate, Dave. I don't know how that part of it works actually, but when everything disappeared, everybody disappeared, you know. But there's a bit in the Course where Jesus says about those who are left behind, right? So, and those who have yet to even come and have an experience here in this dimension, which, like, there's a bit of a backlog apparently. But so Joel Goldsmith would just simply accept atonement for himself, and people would come and tell him their story, and he would sit there and hold his mind open like that. There's no person, there's only me talking to me, and he would take responsibility as a willingness to heal from whatever the particular package of denial is that's being presented from the student or the client, whatever, showing up. And that would be it. He wouldn't dispense advice particularly or anything, and they would go away. And I remember reading in the book, the Infinite Way, I think it was the Infinite Way, where people would often write back to him or give him a donation later on down the track, and they'd say things like, I don't know what happened that day, but I haven't had that issue since I came to see you, and everything changed when I came to your office and blah, blah, blah. So accepting atonement, I'm not separate. That's how you heal. That's how I heal. And this is one of my pet peeves. Yeah, I don't really have any peeves. I'm just trying to find a word to talk about it in a way you'll understand it. But there's an offering that's made through, right? Jesus makes this offering for you to rise up from the drudgery and the density of the human experience, to rise up and to keep rising up. So there's this constancy of stepping into faith, stepping into miracle mindedness again and again and again. Doesn't matter how advanced you think you are, like it just keeps going until finally you have an experience of being outside of time and space, and then you don't need miracles. But one of the things I have in my peeve, it's a great word, kind of describe the word and the thing is kind of like the same thing. It's just annoying. Is people that brothers that teach Course in Miracles and charge money for that, right? It's like, come on, like, what the hell are you doing? This is a journey of faith. You think that like I actually think in that brother's mind, and I'm accepting atonement. Oh, right there for this one particular one I'm thinking of. You think that the student is coming and they're paying for the thing, and it's going to give them, like this whole thing. If they pay for it, they'll give it more quality, more value, etc., etc. Missing the whole point that there is no student. You are the student. The teacher is actually the student, and the student, or the person who comes with the problem or the emptiness or the whatever it is actually the teacher, is actually the one offering you the chance to learn. And you charge them money. It's like, and I remember Amachi, right, the mother, who's a very, very revered, and I went to see her with my teacher Ted and a few other guys. We drove about an hour and a half up the coast. She came along to Australia once, or she comes here reasonably often, but went to see her. Now there was a small donation component to get in, which was for funding one of her, at that time, one of her orphanages that she runs in India. I think she has quite a few actually, and I mean, you'd have to be a bloody tight ass not to want to contribute for the little kiddies, but otherwise it was free. Like her component of it was free. There was this sort of like thing at the door, and then you could buy t-shirts, and there was food for sale and everything else. So, but basically her trip out here and everything was funded by sponsors from Australia, people that value her thing, and they would say, Amma, we want you to come, we're going to buy you a ticket, etc., etc. And she said, sure. It's a very bad impression of Amma, sure. But anyway, one of the things that occurred, so she did her teaching, which was all in Hindi, I guess, or spoken in, I guess, Hindi, maybe not Tamil or whatever, but it was powerful. It was incredibly powerful, right? I didn't understand the words. The words were not my language, but the energy that was invoked through her words, and this is where I talk about in the satsangs. When we do a long one, everybody gets baked. When we do a 3-hour satsang like we did last week, everybody sort of leaves there and they're like, oh my God, I've got to go lay down. Not because they've been doing anything energetic or whatever, but because the energy itself of the certainty of my expression, or the expression through the avatar of Dave, as it's attempted to be being integrated in the process of that satsang, it's like the body can't handle it, because the body was initially made as a defense against the light, defense against the truth, and it has to be repurposed. And that repurposing looks like that idea of healing, atonement, whatever, and you go through that bit by bit, and eventually you just learn to walk with the light without too much reaction to it. But Amachi was doing her thing, and I couldn't sit down. Everybody, there's like over 1,000 people in the hall. It was a big hall, over 1,000 people, probably about 1,200 people. And I went round. She had a little podium thing with all these lovely curtains and drapes, very Eastern sort of style cushions, and it was kind of well appointed. The little things. She had her attendees up there with her. And I went off to the side. I couldn't sit in the audience. I knew what she was talking about. I mean, I'd already had a full-on thing, and I was jumping, leaping into the air. The energy was just so much, and I'm leaping into the air around the side of the thing. And there was like this gap in the curtains on the side, and she looked through, at one point she looked through the curtains and must have seen me out there, because we caught eye contact, and she had this big grin on her face. But I couldn't stop jumping. The energy was too much. My body was reacting to, I just had to keep energetic to make it sort of palatable, I guess, or whatever. I don't know what was going on. But anyway, afterwards, after she'd finished her teaching, she has this thing where everyone can go up on the stage. You get a ticket, and if you want to, you ask for a ticket, you get a ticket. You get in a queue and you go up on the stage, and she gives you a hug, right? That's kind of her nickname, the hugging mother or something or other. I forget the exact thing. But she gives you a hug, and she whispers in your ear, and gives you a little chocolate, right? Now, the chocolate is symbolic, and then off you go. The chocolate is symbolic, right? It's a symbol of gratitude for the energetic that you bring to her. She's not really paying you, but she's demonstrating she's grateful to you for the gift you bring her, which in the West gets completely fucking corrupted. And Western teachers, you have to pay me money to attend my satsangs or my healing centers or my whatever it is. We want money from you. And my teacher was completely like on the rampage about this, and he used to always comment on it, how arse about face it is, because it's the teacher that is the student. The teacher is the one learning. I am the one learning. Everybody that comes to the satsangs, I'm grateful for, and quite often it'll be in retrospect or after when I finished, that the energy of whatever seems to have been presented during the satsang, for me, I'll get a chance to just sit with it for a second and totally let it in, right? Now, that can be confronting sometimes as a teacher or as a teacher-student. It can be confronting, but you meet it and greet it with the same exact principle of defenselessness and atonement that you do with anything else. And if I had little chocolates I could hand out through the screen, I would. But I got given a chocolate. I didn't go up for a hug. I was completely baked. I couldn't sit still in the line. Like everybody had to sit on their bum, and the line would inch along, and 1,000 people, there's like heaps of people. But the thing was, she was expressing gratitude for the student. And that's how it should be. Right? Not the other way around, right? And it says that in A Course in Miracles, in Teaching and Learning. I think the very first line or something it says is teaching and learning with our course proceeds along lines differently from teaching and learning in the world, where it seems that the teacher is giving something to the student. It's not actually that way. The student is giving the teacher the opportunity to integrate or to claim back something that has been previously projected out into the world as an energetic, as a frequency which has been adopted or picked up by the student and being brought back, right, to be relieved of or to be healed of. And that's how healing occurs. The actual process of atonement, I mean, it has to have that divine element about it. You can't just, you have to be able to connect with the Holy Spirit. I accepted already in my own mind atonement for the entirety of the physical realm. That's what I'm guessing. It's a pretty educated guess, but I'm still guessing. That's what gave me the qualification, perhaps. I don't know a better word than that at this stage. That's what gave me the qualification for my revelation. It's like I didn't want anyone to suffer. I didn't want that. It didn't make sense to me that any brother anywhere, even if they'd done something to me which I didn't like or had a judgment or a grievance about, I'd been reading the Sermon on the Mount. I'd been reading about forgiveness, forgive your enemies, love your enemies, and all of that stuff. And that's all I wanted. I wanted the world to be at peace. I wanted there to be forgiveness. It didn't make sense for anything else if God is love. And even though at that time I didn't understand it, not much better than I do now anyway, but even though then I didn't understand it, I felt it in my heart, and it broke me like the world. I don't want anyone to suffer. And there's a there's a prevailing currency to that. It is the modus operandi of the teachers of God. It's like suffering is not acceptable. It's not acceptable. It makes no sense. Anger is not justified. And you have to put yourself into the shoes of Christ, into the shoes of your own divinity through an experience, which is why the experience is so important. It's the thing. Salvation is experiential, not conceptual. The concepts lead you to the threshold, and then you need the experience. But it's why it's so important, because you have to know the truth of your brother. You have to pray and ask. I want to know the truth of my brother. Pray and ask. I want to know the truth of myself. Pray and ask. I want to know the truth of my Creator, God. I want to know my Father. Don't ever forget that that's the whole point of this, is to remember the truth. And hopefully, if you have an out-of-time experience, maybe you'll come back here and help me try to represent it somehow. As best you can. I try as best I can to represent it, and it's always brand new. It's always like, in this moment now, I am whole and perfect, and there's nothing more to say. And we enter together into that silence, into that stillness, and together we wait to be assured and to hear of the voice for the Holy Spirit, the voice for God, to guide us and bring us to our awakening. Anyway, that's it. I'll see you guys. I'm going to be late tomorrow to the Zoom, but I won't be late. I'll be there exactly when I'm meant to be there. Keep it spiritual. But I won't be there at 8 o'clock. I'll be there probably closer to 9. So don't sleep in. Get up at 8 o'clock. Support Tina. She's going to be doing some teaching, learning, reading from the course, which I've asked her to do to back up this video. And we're also going to do another session of teaching and learning in the satsang, and stay in that frequency and stay with that frequency of atonement, so that we can bring ourselves into alignment with our Christ-minded frequency more efficiently, less tardily, so we're not dragging our feet. All right, let's make some progress in this and really get into it. So, thank you.